Hi there, this is James Swanwick, and you're listening to the Alcohol Free Lifestyle Podcast, where you learn how to take back control over alcohol and live a life of health, wealth, love, and happiness. So let's begin, shall we? So, Josh, congratulations. You're almost a year alcohol free. Tell us a little bit about you, what you do, your age, where you live, and then we'll go in there from there. And we've got some questions that are coming in actually on the Facebook Live. For you, the listener, we're recording this inside of our Alcohol Free Lifestyle Community Facebook group as well. But yeah, Josh, give us a little bit of an overview on you.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thanks for having me, James. Josh Pappas. Grew up here in North Carolina. So I'm physically here in Charlotte, North Carolina on the East Coast. And yeah, man, it's been quite a journey. Hard to believe it's coming up on a year, alcohol free, but I do sales. I've done sales in my whole life, actually in digital health sales, and now spent the last 6-8 years working for early stage venture backed digital health companies, running, growing, scaling sales teams. And so it's been exciting to be on the ground stage of some of these companies and really cool digital health type tools that have taken us to the next level on the healthcare side. But yeah, I mean, the journey's been kind of nuts. I mean, I remember seeing the ad, kind of right place, right time. I actually got started with the program when I was spending 3 months living out in beautiful Austin, Texas. So definitely come a long way since then, and happy to kind of dig into the journey. But it's really never looked back ever since I started, and super proud of all of the community members and friends, including yourself, on the way. So glad to be here and looking forward to dig in a little bit about my journey.
Yeah, amazing. So when you said you saw an ad for our organization that helps high performers to stop drinking. Is that what you meant? Did you see an ad on Facebook or something?
Yeah, it's funny. I always tell people I can't. I wish I could remember exactly what I searched for, exactly where I was. But I think like if anybody's been in my shoes, right? I kind of hit that point where I had spent some time, going 6 months without alcohol. Spent some time, kind of doing moderation. For me, right, it was always something in the background. I was for all intents purposes, what I thought was high performing, was rather successful for my age, and but something was just kind of off, and I felt it, and so kind of went through this this journey as I'm sure many people are, and one day it was kind of like nothing really has hit, but I'm ready. I'm ready to do it for real. But I grew up. My dad was a coach, so I've always been like a big proponent of let me get around a network, call it a team, whatever you want to call it, and then also too, I was super into business and kind of taking the next level professionally, and so came across you guys, had a couple phone calls. It's funny, man. I remember having some initial phone calls, and on the intake form, it was I forgot whatever age bracket it said, and I was like, well, let me go and tell a little white lie here and see if I could have a conversation and try to although I was a little bit younger on the scale of whatever that cutoff was, let me have a conversation here. And I remember the intake call, and then just being able to really not knowing what was going on, and having that first call, having that first polo, which man, it seems like it's been transformative, really ever since that point. So I'm super glad you guys let me under the radar and believed in me, even though I was a little bit under that age cutoff, and haven't looked back since.
How old are you now?
Yeah, man, 31. And
31,
so
yeah.
31, and had lots of milestones really since I've been in the program, right? Got engaged in November, had multiple investment properties, and have kind of, also started a podcast and done some other cool things from a professional standpoint too. So all that within this year. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I think you're referring to the fact that we say that we really only take people who are over the age of 35. And so you lied to me. I can't believe you lied to me, Josh. So you said you were 30 or 35 when you were actually 30 or 31, but we took you on as a client anyway. And the reason we say 35 and older is because probably 95% of people who apply to be part of our program who are under the age of 35 don't take action. And my hypothesis is that when you're in your early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, that the pain of consistent drinking isn't there. It's not there enough. You still think that you've got decades to try and resolve this situation. And so there doesn't appear to be such a great need as someone who's maybe over the age of 35, who's maybe married with kids, maybe they're in their 40s and 50s, and they realize they're probably halfway through life and time's not doing them any favors. And for some people, it's life or death. Whereas when you're younger, you think you're invincible, right? And that you'll just kick the can down the road and deal with it later. So just for clarification, that is why we did that. Now, you said a few things there about investment properties and work and stuff. So from being almost a year alcohol free, I'm going to assume that you had clarity and focus and energy and strategy. What do you think have been the tangible results of that consistent consequence of not drinking?
Yeah, it's a great question. I kind of put it in the first bucket of really developing a kind of a confidence. And what's crazy is I would say, and I'm sure others around me would say, I grew up as an athlete, obviously in business, being in sales, high performing. So I feel like in a lot of areas I had probably too much confidence in some ways. But when it came to drinking, it was always this lack of confidence, right? Or either, hey, I need to do this to, prove to somebody, from a drinking, right? But I think even more so giving up drinking and kind of going alcohol free, that was one of those areas where I just lacked, for whatever reason, confidence. And so I think that was one of the first areas that I noticed. And, from the program that really resonated with me is, lean into some of these uncomfortable situations, but do it with confidence, right? And the way that you kind of answer and the way that you approach it, really does matter. And I saw that firsthand and, of just, hey, what do you want to drink, right? Client dinners or this or that, club soda lime, of club soda lime, whatever it is, mocktails. We were out there in Colombia with mocktails. And so I think the confidence was key. And it's such a subtle thing that you don't think about, right? So you can do the same thing, right? Order club soda lime, do the same, but the way that you're approaching that, I think, was a shift in a mindset that was able to, once I developed that confidence there, it's like, oh wow, I have all these pillars of confidence that I can transfer over my life. So I think that was one of the first areas where I saw big difference. And then to me, it was kind of, I was operating, call it 80%, right? So, things weren't terrible, but man, I think a lot of people look at it where it's like, hey, we're operating at 80%, but then I think in certain areas, the not drinking allowed me to get that extra 20% in lots of different buckets. And so, the clarity was one. I think being able to have these ideas, when I would sit around and think that I was networking or talking to people, when maybe there was alcohol involved, like nothing really got done, nothing really got pulled through. Chances are, probably, to be completely honest, the ideas were probably a little bit shit. If far as being honest, even though in my head, right, they probably thought they were good, right? And so I think being able to take it from idea to pull through is a type of clarity that being alcohol free that has allowed me to do that. And then I think also the last bucket I put it in is the relationships, right? And then to me, it wasn't a drastic difference of, oh, I got to get rid of, I know everybody's a little bit different, but for me, it wasn't a drastic, I got to get rid of everybody in my life, right? I think what it allowed me to do is to really start to understand and see areas and maximize some of those relationships, to be completely honest, right? I mean, people have come and gone, right? But it wasn't a total cleansing. I think what it allowed me to do is realize, hey, here are some of these relationships that I have. And then more importantly, hey, maybe here are the 5 or 10 people that are involved in some cool things that I hadn't, selfishly, right? I had no idea that they were involved in that because I probably was, either not in the right state of mind or I didn't really know or care to know them at that level. So I've seen, really taking it the next level to some of those relationships. And so I wish there was a silver bullet, to all of that, but I do kind of, think it was the not drinking and then kind of, taking those areas to the next level.
Mm. What was your drink or drinks of choice before you stopped drinking?
Man, I didn't necessarily have a drink of choice, but I didn't necessarily have a drink that I would probably turn down, right? It's probably the best way, the best way to put it, right? But I was really one of those where it was, I kind of tricked myself to believe that it's crazy that, hey, I was successful, right? Rather young. And, so once I kind of like, that was my reward system, right? Is being able to, to do that. Like, I deserve this. I work hard, right? Maybe occasionally during the week, but really it was kind of like a weekend reward. And then next thing you know, it was kind of like, all right. And then it's, Monday, let's do it all over. So I kind of, got into the, got to the point where as I started getting into a serious relationship, it was you're really responsible for more than just yourself, right? And so I do think that was part of it too, is you realize, hey, you can be selfish and do what you want to do, right? But then once you have, and then I started getting more responsibilities at work, right? Having to have teams under me, and so you start realizing, hey, if nothing else, it's not just you that has some of the effects here, and so. For me now, I always tell people I got, Club Soda Lime as a drink of choice. I really like these high O's, which is a great little functional, way to quit drinking because I'm pretty health conscious. And so, it's been interesting to see, I grabbed a couple of these at the pool last weekend here in hot North Carolina. And so it's been kind of a interesting transition.
Yeah. And so most people who are listening or watching this are probably thinking to themselves, well, how do I actually stop for a long time? And is it actually fun? Will I have to retreat from social activities? Will I have to retreat from society? Geez, the idea of stopping drinking sounds hard. Man, it sounds boring. Wow, my whole identity is going to change if I stop drinking. Oh, stopping drinking for a year just sounds so improbable and so far out of reach, so forth and so forth. What was your experience in actuality? Did you experience that over the past almost 12 months? What came up for you?
Yeah, so I think I always like to preface this with there's still going to be, those challenging times in life, right? So I don't want to sugarcoat this and say, hey, when alcohol free and, life's good every single day, that I've been in the program and or in life has been, fantastic, right? But I do think that it's allowed me to, to kind of face some of those, challenging times, right? Some of those, sad times. But on the flip side, man, I actually think that some of the most memorable times, I mean, that was my biggest thing. And the reason why I kind of resonated with your program, James, is because I had kind of done it let me detach, let me, go away from areas that, being out, being with people, which I love. And that really didn't work. Right. So I think getting out of my comfort zone and being able to lean into some of that, man, I was in Las Vegas for a big healthcare conference, digital health conference, and was front row, with Ludacris performing. And then we went to, Dre's nightclub, and we went to some other different areas. So everybody's a little bit different, but I would say, we obviously had an amazing time in Colombia. I've traveled a lot for work. I'm going to, Greece and Italy for a wedding. I've probably done 5 or 6, alcohol-free weddings, down in Miami and some other different areas. So, everybody I think has to approach it a little bit differently. But, for me, that was part of my identity, is being around, people, being socially interactive. And, to me, it's a little bit of a superpower, right? We were down in Miami, bride and groom and the whole wedding party up in kind of the Fort Lauderdale area. They wanted to go down to, to South Beach, which is, down to a nightclub after the wedding. And hey, I was the hero because I was the driver, right? And went down there. I wouldn't say it's my, first scene to go to, right? But I think once you start to realize, and I'm sure a lot of the people that you talk to is, you think it's like all about you and everybody's going to notice, everybody's going to care. And then you kind of realize, number one, less people than you think, care, right? So you kind of just have to be comfortable in your own skin. And then number two, right, I think you're able to, you can pick and choose. Everybody's a little bit different, but for me, it's allowed me to, still continue to do those, those fun activities, just kind of maximize, some of the people and places, and kind of remember it all and be in the moment. And so, for me, that really was, one of the areas, I probably did more, because it's kind of coming out of COVID. I probably did more amazing trips and people and experiences, alcohol free than with alcohol, to be completely honest.
Incredible. We've got a question here from the Facebook group from a gentleman named Mick. And Mick asks you, Josh, how do you keep your mind on the right path or fight the urge to go out and drink with friends?
Yeah, so I think early on, it was challenging, right? Like I can remember kind of when but believe it or not, right, I gave up, drinking on 4th of July, right, which seems kind of, anti what, 4th of July is all about, right? Hot dogs and beers. I think because I embarked on the journey, the uncomfortability once I joined your program, James, I had kind of, dealt with it a little bit, right? So I think if you're first kind of embarking on this journey, it is understanding that kind of threshold for, all right, what is my uncomfortability level, and then I think for me it was, in what resonated about your program, James, is there's have a couple easy ways of going out and just being able to be proactive and be confident about it. I mean, those are the two areas, and it probably doesn't come easy, right? But when you're out with friends, understand who are your real friends, and your real friends aren't going to pressure you, right? And that's kind of going back to it, right? In my circle, nobody really cared. If anything, they enjoyed being around the real me, other than that. But everybody's going to have different friend groups, so I think number one, being kind of uncomfortable with, at the beginning it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and then number two, the confidence factor of club soda lime. If you feel more comfortable holding a drink, right, that's a great way to do it. Tell the bartender in a short glass, right, so not everybody's looking at you with this tall water glass. So there's some little nuanced ways I think that you can kind of make yourself feel more comfortable. But I think ultimately going out and really within the first kind of month or so is don't go crazy, but really do put yourself in some of those uncomfortable situations, because then I think once you're able to do that, you can kind of say, okay, I really got it, and then you can kind of go up from there. Would be some of my advice in some of what I did. I mean, I was out in Austin, Texas, which is known for its bar scene, right? And so there was a lot of temptation out there, but I think once you start to realize you can go in and truly enjoy, and then be kind of completely okay with telling the people that you're around, right? If you have significant others, my significant other still drinks in moderation, right? And so there's, for some people it works, but still being uncomfortable, or still being okay with saying, hey, had a great time, I'm out, right? Or, hey, the crowd of people that we're with, is everybody's getting, to a certain extent, and there's no more fun conversation, right? So let me call it in early, right? And get a workout in, right? And so I think that was the other area, is waking up in the morning, working out for me was my way of, going back to the sports metaphor of saying, hey, like I'm that 1% better than somebody else, right? So all the people maybe that's doing the same thing as me in business, I can bet one thing, I'll be up on Saturday morning, hitting a workout to start the day, right? And so I'm that 1% better than them, and that's kind of what I told myself to to keep it going. People look at me crazy, like, wait a minute, you're out here at midnight and you're going to go work out, but it's a great feeling to be able to do that.
Mm. We've got another comment here. I'm not sure if it's a question, but it's a comment which we can comment on. Someone by the name of Yassine says that Yassine's on day 5 and scared of being uncomfortable. Just can't take the hangovers. I can't. So maybe we could talk a little bit about being scared of that discomfort. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me it still is, it's probably still something that I battle with too. And if anything, right, the uncomfortability of it, but to me, I look back and I can confidently say this, there's been, again, other areas that have been, whether it's, tough relationship wise, family wise. I mean, everybody has their different areas, but, man, I can remember all the times where, I woke up hungover, anxious, or in certain cases, right, like, oh my gosh, what did I do? What did I say? And that type of uncomfortability, to me, I can still remember certain situations where that happened, and waking up and not having to feel that type of angst and anxiety, and Sunday night hitting and it's like, oh my God, I got to go to work. I feel like shit. And as you get a little bit older, like that, and there's really just none of that. And so I think in some ways, I always try to think back to, at least in the beginning stages, think back to some of those, not necessarily negative times, but, those really times where I felt like that and just be like, hey, this type of uncomfortability that I'm feeling now is pales in comparison to that. Right. And so that's what kind of, worked for me. And I'm sure we all have those, potential, reasons and stories. But I do think that, and I think some of that had to do with, learning your program. The negative thinking is something that you kind of got to get out of your own head, right? Because if you continue to remember some of those times or remember or hone in on it, then it's all you're going to think about and it will kind of consume you, right? So I think for me, is, a lot of times when, went out or just did in general, it became second nature, right? Like, oh yeah, I don't drink, but that's like hasn't come up in conversation in a long time, right? Like I've been, going out. That definitely is a process, but I do think it's a balance of, of understanding and kind of being okay with being uncomfortable, but not like get yourself in your own head to the level of it's all you think about, right? Because I think that will do the opposite, right? And it kind of consume you.
Right. We've got another question here. Did you lose weight?
What's crazy is I was relatively, I would say, healthy, right? So it's not like I lost, noticeable weight. But I think, again, what it helped me do going back to in a lot of areas of my life is, for me, it was kind of a conscious decision to go from kind of like that 80%. So I think what it has allowed me to do is exercise way more efficiently, way more at a high level. It's allowed me to gain, strength and mental clarity. But I tell people all the time, I mean, that's really for some people, there's there's some of those, there's no downside to me. I mean, I feel healthier and I haven't felt, maybe it's just, I still try to knock on wood, play a lot of sports. I mean, I haven't had any injuries. I haven't, had, honestly, much sickness in some of those areas. So I think that overall my health is way elevated. But I think within the first, couple areas, I could definitely tell a noticeable, distance on being able to kind of train harder. But to me, it's just, being able to turn it up to that next level. And so I think everybody's, different. But for me, it's been from a health conscious perspective, pretty remarkable.
If you're watching live in our Facebook Live group, go ahead and post a comment or a question here for Josh. We've got Josh Pappas here, who's coming up on 1 year alcohol free. Josh went through our Project 90 process and experience. Just on that, Josh, what was that experience like? Like for someone who doesn't really know what Project 90 is, other than you got to stop drinking for 90 days, what is it? What did you experience? How could you describe this to someone?
Yeah, well, for some of the people, if they're on the group or even considering joining, if you're like me, there was a lot of I don't necessarily know what I'm getting into, and then B, I think there was a lot of will this help, right? And I've done a lot of different, I would say 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So I think, two of the main areas that I always, tell people is, it's a great program, but also too, it's a great program if you're like willing to pretty much kind of go all in, right. And kind of truly embrace it. And I think that's the case for a lot of different, programs or people. It's like, hey, you and I can take the same course, right. But the results can be different. So for me, I was definitely not necessarily nervous, but I really didn't know what to expect. And then I kind of got in on that first call, and it was everything I expected and more. But a lot of that had to do with I fully participated, right? And so I think that that meant kind of committing to it, meaning posting the polos, and then I also too. And I don't know if, maybe this is just me, but in certain areas, I think that because I'm in sales and things like that, I can be like a chameleon. And so I can kind of go and say and do what I think people want me to do versus like what the real me. And so I think I kind of held myself, and I think honestly the program did too, James, the coaching, Victoria and everybody else kind of held it to a standard of, no, be the real authentic you, right? There's other like-minded people that are kind of going through this journey, but it allowed me to learn from other people, but then also to not just kind of go with it and saying, oh yeah, I drank, but everything's good. And oh yeah, I learned this. It kind of allowed me to say, hey guys, I'm struggling, with this, or hey, I learned this. And I think being able to kind of come into it from an authentic perspective. But the program was great. I love the 90-day aspect of working on one small area each day. The community was 10 out of 10. I mean, it was fantastic for all the people that I met. And quite honestly, I mean, it was a very diverse group of lots of different people, lots of different individuals, professionals. So I made, pretty meaningful connections personally as well as professionally, right? That I still kind of connect with some of those groups. I know James had a mastermind group because I think part of, for me too, it was making some of these, connections that were more than going back to it. It felt, sometimes I forgot that he was even about drinking or alcohol free, right? I mean, it kind of got to that point where it was, just that group that I could connect with. And I was like, oh yeah, we're working on alcohol free. That was kind of what we're doing there. And so those are my two main tips is if anybody's similar to me, you can kind of get to a point where you're going through, you're saying you're participating, but you're not really doing it as your authentic self, right? You're doing it what you kind of want people to see for you or what you think people want to hear, right? So I think that was one of the areas that I made sure that I tried to go in and do.
If you're listening on the podcast and you'd like some details about the Project 90 experience, you can have an introductory exploratory call. There's nothing to buy on that call, but you can go over to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90 and there'll be a whole lot of details there. There's a video, there's some overview, some case studies of some folks who went through it, and there's a link on that page where you can fill out a short form, hopefully tell the truth, unlike Josh who lied about his age, and fill in the details, leave your name and number, and one of our coaches will phone you just for an introductory conversation. But I would just implore you, do not book that call if you're looking to be persuaded to stop drinking. We're not here to persuade you to stop drinking. You have to already have been persuaded. You already got to have persuaded yourself. You're ready. You absolutely know you must need to stop drinking. You're ready to do it. The only question now is whether you're going to do it with us or whether you're going to, try another way. Ellie asks a question inside of the live Facebook group. And by the way, if you're not a member of our Facebook group, you're welcome to be. You can go to just go to Facebook and type in alcohol-free lifestyle-community. And we do have a free Facebook group that's open to anyone. And there's a pretty engaged community of people in there who are supporting each other to reduce or stop drinking. But Ellie asked the question, do you have a sponsor or accountability partner?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wouldn't say formally I do, but luckily I think, around this journey, I've been able to surround myself with lots of accountability partners. And so I would say my fiance is, one of those, rocks of being able to, with a lot of different areas of my life, but particularly here. I mean, we had been together and, she has seen the kind of the transformation, the journey has been along for that ride. And so I think that she's definitely the accountability, person in there. But luckily, that's kind of what Project 90 did, for me is provide some of that accountability. And, it's nice because it's not like, hey, I'm checking in on you accountability. It's like, hey, I want to, check in and make sure that everybody else is doing. And then I think for me too, being able to have a lot of different, people that hopefully I could provide some of that accountability to, right? And so, mentor and do some of them. But, for me, it was being able to have some of those people around me. I think if you're like me, you might have some people that come and go out of your relationships. You might have to cleanse some. Luckily for me, I think it was just about I think the biggest accountability I had to have was almost like self accountability. And that's part of what Project 90 allowed me to do, is kind of create in my toolbox some of the self accountability. But if you don't necessarily have, I know some people potentially in their group, maybe don't have those people that are like minded, lean on Project 90 to have some of that accountability. But then also too, try to find, I guess the best tip I'd have is, find some people like those Project 90, around your inner circle, right? Or gravitate to some, right? I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and believe it or not, there's some pretty amazing groups of, fitness and alcohol free. And some of these are probably in your community. You just don't even really know that they exist, right? And so I think Project 90 was the springboard to kind of seeking out some of those relationships.
Yeah, nice one. I'm going to do a little Marco Polo for our Project 90 members. Here we go. Hey, Project 90 members, I'm interviewing our alumni, Josh Pappas, who's about to celebrate 1 year alcohol free. You want to say hey to the Project 90 team, Josh?
Hey guys, it's been a while since I Marco Poloed. I might have to get back on there when I go to my wedding in Greece and Italy. Do some celeb polos.
Yeah. Maybe just for the P90 guys, you're on camera now with some of the guys who are going through that 90-day process. What advice would you have for them, Josh, now that you're almost a year alcohol free?
Well, first of all, congrats for being there, because that's the hardest part, right? The majority of people don't even get to that, to that point. Like I said, be the authentic yourself, number one. Have confidence, and make sure to listen and participate. But then, for me, the biggest takeaway was learning from other people and truly making some great connections.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Josh. Going back to the Facebook group now, we've got another question, which is, had you tried to stop drinking for a long time prior to joining the Project 90 program? That was part A, so I'll get you to answer that first, and then I'll do part B.
Yeah, so part A is a good question, and I would say the long story short answer is yes, in different ways, right? I mean, I think it kind of was a wave of everything's fine to something doesn't feel right to oh yeah, let me try. I will say before Project 90, probably I was always 1 foot in, 1 foot out. What I mean by that is, went 6 months without drinking, but I hadn't made that mindset switch. It was, truly kind of like to not drink, to, maybe try some moderation, and, maybe it kind of didn't all click really until I got to your point, James. I got to the point, and then I always liken it to like that was the nail, hammer in the nail. Like, okay, finally, let's do it, and let's commit to it. And for me, it was that commitment of, hey, I'm going to do this. Probably with or without Project 90, but like in a lot of other areas of my life, I feel like, let me get around a group that will help me, make it a no-brainer, right? And so, for me, that's kind of what Project 90 did it. But there definitely was lots of up and downs, even within the program, while on the program, because the one hardest part is life doesn't stop happening, right? It's kind of like, okay, great, you're alcohol free. Well, life doesn't really kind of care, because it's going to continue to happen. There's probably going to be good or bad things that continue to happen. But so I think that's probably the hardest part, is you wish you can kind of say, hey, guys, work, life, relationships, I'm doing this 90-day program where I don't drink, so everybody be nice to me and cheer for me. And the Project 90 folks will, but unfortunately the real world in life doesn't. So I think that for me, it's now as I'm looking at it and I look back on it, is find some areas. Definitely don't. I don't necessarily think you should wait till rock bottom to to do some of this, right? Be proactive in some certain areas, but definitely if you're going to be a part of James and his program, make that commitment, and then kind of help yourself pull through some of that commitment by being a part of P90.
The part B of that question was, what was your ultimate reason to stop?
Ultimate reason to stop. Wow, that's deep. I don't know if I've thought about it that deeply. I think probably the biggest area is the biggest two areas, right, is taking the next step, for myself, number one, right? Because if you stop for really anybody other than yourself, you're always going to, have kind of a hair of resentment, or you're going to, kind of look back and kind of always have an out, right? So I think number one is truly doing it for yourself is part A. And then I think for me, it was, the secondary portion of that, right, is, there was a lot of big life events happening, right? Taking next step in my relationship, just where I was from a career and professional level, and it just seemed like this one little, it wasn't little, right, but this one area was like holding me back, and I was just like, what am I doing, right? Like if in any other area, if there was something blocking me from doing something professionally, or, on a sports field, or, even personally, I would be like, okay, let's just get rid of it. Right. But here it was this like nagging thing. And so I think being able to, fully have those three kind of pillars: relationship, personal, all of that. I knew I had to kind of get rid of the elephant in the room, which was drinking. And there's a lot of unknowns there, and I think that's probably the biggest key. Is like, I hope things got better. They ended up, getting better in numerous ways, but you kind of go into it not necessarily knowing that on the front end, and so that can be scary. And I think for a lot of areas it was like, is my identity, am I going to, like a good example of that is, to overthink it is, again, we've been to a lot of weddings. I'm going to a lot of weddings. I'm getting married, here coming, next year. Right. And so like, that was one of the key areas where it's like, well, I don't even know how to go to a wedding, much less go to a wedding and not drink. And then you start to realize, you think about it, been to, 6 or 7 different weddings, and guess what? They've been fantastic, and alcohol wasn't involved. Right. And so I think there's a lot of those areas where you think yourself to all these if then what ifs, and then reality ends up being, especially when you're comfortable and confident with it, reality ends up being 10 times better at some of these events.
Hey, let's do a little Marco Polo in the Beyond 90 group. And for those listening, if you're not sure what I'm talking about when I say Marco Polo, we have a video messaging application whereby our clients get to converse with each other, much like you would in a closed Facebook group, except that you send little videos to each other versus the written word, which tends to be in Facebook. It's like a private, exclusive group where people send little video selfies to each other. And what it does is that it helps people stay accountable. It helps people get to know other clients. And that really helps keep people in momentum. Biggest word there, I think, is accountability. A lot of people say that being in that community holds them accountable and makes their journey towards at least 90 days alcohol-free that much easier. So let me just do a little Beyond 90 little post here. Hey, Beyond 90, I am interviewing one of our alumni, Josh Pappas, live on the podcast here. Josh, you're going to be 1 year alcohol-free on July 4th. What's life like?
Life is great. Good to see everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Again, last time I'm sure I saw some of you guys. We were living it up in Colombia, which was an amazing trip. And so hope everybody's doing well. I need to make sure and connect with some of you guys because it's been a while, and catch up and see how everybody else is doing. So feels great. Time flew, but haven't looked back. And so great to see you guys.
Awesome. So, you mentioned Colombia. So for those listening, we have an annual event called AFL Live, Alcohol Free Lifestyle Live. And this year, which was the last weekend of January, we all went down to Medellin, Colombia. I've spent a lot of time in Medellin, love it. And Josh was one of those. I think we had a group of about 26 of us, I think, in the end, that flew down to Medellin, Colombia, and we went around. It was a great trip, wasn't it? We went out on a boat trip. Went out to dinners. We had a day in a hotel conference room where we did lots of fun exercises and had speakers, and not one drop of alcohol was consumed. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that experience for those who maybe haven't been on a retreat or a similar trip before, where a whole bunch of people with a common goal get together and spend time together?
Yeah, it was I mean, it was kind of truly a life-changing, type trip, right? I mean, I think number one, being with that type of group, that elevated group was fantastic. But it was one of those trips and one of those places that it kind of makes you take a step back and really say, oh man, like this is living life at the fullest, right? And not just where we were, beautiful place, but all of the different techniques. I still find myself, James, one of the best experiences was the breathing. The breathing exercises, and I was a skeptic, right? For anybody on here, it was basically a group that came in and focused on some specific breathing techniques. So we were doing like some like for 30 minutes, that type of breathing, and it was crazy because how much of your control and how much energy can be generated through certain techniques like that. So loved it because we felt great. We did a lot of wellness activities. Obviously we had amazing meals, amazing conversations, amazing connections, but I think that's one of the key areas. And if you're going through Project 90, you're interested in there, that to me is like the accumulation, call it the Super Bowl of being a part of that and being able to experience that. So if you get the opportunity, number one, I would say for sure lean in and do that, just for the experience from a life perspective. But looking back too, I think it's like a lot of areas. If you go into P90, or if you go into that retreat and you try to like consume every little tip or every trick, it's going to feel overwhelming. But for me, I kind of gravitated, the breathing being an example, and then I'm sure there's some examples in the Project 90 of what kind of works, what are the two or three areas that I want to focus on short term that works, and how do I kind of if I go to any event like that, or even with P90, like how do I pull through 4 or 5 different areas that work for me. And the breathing's one. I mean, I work from home, but important meetings or this or that, I come in and or different areas, and pull some of those through. So it was a fantastic time, but it also too, I think kind of helped from a perspective of some of the speakers that you had, and it's all not necessarily going to resonate, you're going to do every day, but I think that's one of the cool areas is you're not just going sightseeing and doing some of those areas. There's some really actionable and tangible ways that you can kind of come through that type of trip, that I was able to pull through. So that was the cool part.
Yeah, amazing. We're actually just finishing a new platinum program where we're going to do 3 significant trips per year, actually. And probably for like 3 nights, 4 days. And we're going to do things like that breath work and a business mastermind. And to participate in that platinum program, obviously you've got to go through the 90 days of stopping drinking. And then from there, like you referenced before, just because you stop drinking for 90 days doesn't mean that life all of a sudden is just amazing. Life still happens, right? Life doesn't care about your feelings. So what we really do post 90 days is really give folks the tools to be able to deal with stress and anxiety, to be able to market their business, to be able to say, I love you, or I don't love you anymore, to get a divorce, to ask someone to marry you, to lose some weight, to sleep better, to make $1 million, or in many cases, $1 million more, in some cases, $1 million more per month. I mean, we've got folks in our Project 90 program at the moment, without giving away too many details, who do $100 million in annual revenue. I mean, that's a lot. And then we've got other folks who are, much more modest, I guess, wealth creators, but very successful in their field. We have physicians, we've got some lawyers, we have accountants, we've got executives, we've got e-commerce business owners. We've got working professionals, well-educated, articulate, but they're stuck in the stop-start cycle of drinking, and they're not alcoholics, but they know they're drinking too much. And like Josh was talking about here, they wanted some accountability, they wanted community, they wanted it to be fun, and I get a sense that it was fun for you, or at least it's been fun the last year, because you certainly talk with much enthusiasm about the process, Josh.
Yeah, it's been fun. And I think that's, one of the areas too, for me, that was a focus is And I think the one thing I'll challenge all those people out there is, not even from a financial perspective, but I think for me, there were some certain areas, a good example is, starting a newsletter and podcast, right? Or, there were some certain areas where I thought about it, maybe had the idea, but again, didn't necessarily do any of that pull through. That being a part of the P90 program, but I think ultimately being alcohol free helped with kind of unlock these creative business ideas, these creative areas in my life that I honestly didn't even really know kind of existed, or I thought they existed, but in actuality I was able to pull them through, right? And I think that everybody has their versions of that, and so I think as you're going through the journey, it's probably a good idea to write some of those down, or if you have some of those ideas, do it, right? Because going back to earlier, if you sit there and think about alcohol free, not drinking, that's one area where you can do, versus if you think about some of those new areas, and then more importantly than just thinking about that, pulling some of those through. I mean, I think that was super helpful in some certain areas to spend my time doing whatever it is that makes you passionate, for sure. And so for me, those have been really great. And some of those that haven't even been monetary yet, right? Like the podcast is the fun side project that I have that brings me joy. And if anything, it hasn't the multi-million-dollar idea hasn't come yet, but I think there's a certain areas that you're kind of building, laying the bricks of some really cool relationships and some really cool next steps. And so yeah, it's been I would say more impactful and fun. And if anything, the personal relationships that I have, I think have really gone to the next level, right? I mean, physically gone to the next level, because I went from not being engaged to engaged, right? So I think in certain areas it certainly has, but I think the coolest part is there's been a lot of those joy, and I've got to experience that to the to the fullest, right? And then on the other side of it, there's been downsides of if anything, there's been sadness, but I've kind of been able to handle those and be able to have the relationships or help others get through that, right? Because I was there and present, and wasn't able to do some of those. And it's interesting, James, I haven't really gotten to the point where where I felt like super comfortable kind of like going all in and being like, hey, here's my story, or hey, I want to help, a million people get alcohol free. Right. And I do think that I start to see, I'm happy to, because it's come up in conversations, right. Particularly, if we're out and about, sometimes people, and again, it's not in a negative way. They're like, oh, how did you like, how is quitting drinking, right? Like how is it good? And I'm happy to have a conversation about them and kind of give them my perspective, my journey. I'm certainly not one to be like, hey, I judge you because you drink. Hey, I judge, all your different lifestyles, right? But I think slowly, and as I'm progressing, the program or just in general, right, I do think I do kind of gravitate to helping, particularly like in my profession, salespeople, up and coming salespeople, right? Get them to understand that, hey, like there's not just one path, right? Like you don't just have to be like the drinking person that goes out, does client dinner, and like that's how you become successful, right? There is an avenue, right? And here's what I did. And I'm happy to share it if it helps, a couple people, or at least gives them like a feeling of saying, hey, I can be where I want to be, particularly some younger people, I can be where I want to be by doing, by being alcohol free. And I think that's I'm slowly starting to get a little bit more comfortable with, with having that conversation with them.
Final question, Josh. What are you going to be doing on July 4, which is 1 year alcohol free?
July 4, believe it or not, I'm going to be on an airplane flying from Italy back to New York. So I have a wedding in New York, but getting ready to next week go and spend 2 weeks in Europe. So we have a wedding that we are attending in Athens, Greece, and then flying over and spending some time in the Amalfi Coast in Italy, my fiance and I. So celebrating love in Italy. I mean, in Greece, I'm part Greek. Hence the last name Pappas. So, maybe finding some long lost relatives out there. So spending an amazing time out in Europe, hopefully getting some amazing experiences. And I'll make sure maybe to do some polos at the wedding. I'm doing that all alcohol free. So can't wait to eat my way through Italy and Greece. And then, yeah, I mean, I think it'll be I guess I'll get back and spend New York, July 4th, alcohol free at that time, probably a little bit jet lagged and not feeling the greatest. But, to me, it's kind of the ultimate, the ultimate Independence Day, right? Being super alcohol free and celebrating that with some close, friends and family there in New York.
Amazing, Josh. Well, congratulations on your journey. Well done on coming up on a year alcohol free. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's funny because a lot of people, when they join us in our program, are really, really cautious about anyone else knowing that they're doing it. They're like, oh, this is confidential, right? It's private, it's confidential, which it is. The only people that will know that you're in it are me, our coaches, and then the other members. But the funny thing is that by 90 days, a lot of those same people who are worried about privacy and confidentiality are like, hey, James, do you want me to come on your podcast and share my story? I don't even have to ask half the time. It's hilarious. It's because people, they have this, and I totally get it, because of cultural conditioning. They think that people are going to worry that they've got a drinking problem, that they're an alcoholic, that there's something wrong, that they're embarrassed, they've got the shame. And it's all perfectly normal to feel that way. But what invariably happens is people go through this process. They start feeling amazing. They start realizing that most people don't care that they're not drinking, and they have fun. And in the end, they want to share it with as many people as possible. So I really acknowledge you for wanting to share your story with as many people, Josh. Thanks for sharing some time with us here. And I'm sure that your story will inspire many others to have a better relationship with alcohol.
Awesome, James. And definitely feel free to connect with me. And I'm sure you can pass out my contact information, and look forward to having any conversations, helping anybody out any way that I can. So thanks for having me.
All right, Josh. Thanks, mate. Take care. And to you, the listener, we'll catch you on the next one. If you're an executive, entrepreneur, or investor who's sick of the stop-start cycle and the damaging effects alcohol has on your health, happiness, and family, and you're ready to regain confidence, become more present with your spouse and children, reduce stress, anxiety, and irritability, sleep better, increase focus and productivity, and feel better quickly, you're invited to apply to become a Project 90 client. Applicants can apply for an introductory interview by visiting alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90. There's a link in the show notes, which you can just click, but that link is alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90.